great to have you along as we welcome you to yet another edition of Conversations of Connection.
Mental wellness in sports and life.
And I'm Scott Murray, along with my sidekick.
Yes, Dr. Nina Ruiz-Storia, and we are here. We have a great guest today, Omar Figueroa, and he has been boxing for many years. Started in 2008 to 2022, just retired, and he's here today to really share his story about why he retired and the value he's now investing in his mental health. So I'm really excited to have him on the show today.
Yeah, it really is. I remember in the day, probably long before he was ever born, covering things with Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran and Marvin Hagler and all the great boxers of the 70s, 80s into the 90s. And then you didn't see a lot about boxing, and then it started to come back.
It did.
And it's really it's exciting to hear what he's going to share with us about just not only mental wellness, but just sports in general and his life in general, and some of the battles that he's had to overcome.
Yep, it's going to be really great, and I think there's a need for his message.
No question
today.
about it. No question about it. Especially in this world that we're involved in today. It's not the kind, courteous, respectful world that we all grew up in.
Right.
So it's a much different scenario. So this is going to be interesting. I'm anxious to see what he has to say.
And here he is, Omar.
Yep.
Thank you for being on the show today.
Welcome.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, I've heard bits and pieces of your story, but I think what's most empowering right now for you is just being able to retire and kind of share your message about mental health. But why don't you share with everybody about your story when you started boxing and how you got into it?
Well, I mean, it started when I was born, really. My father was always a fan of the sport, so he wished to have boxed, that's what he wanted to do. So he kind of, in a way, vicariously lived through me, putting me in the sport and having me go through the ranks and everything. So it was something that I never really had a choice in, and I was just kind of thrown into it and was like, hey, we have to do this. I knew I was going to be a world champion when I was a little boy, and that's just the way things were.
You say you knew you were going to be a champion. I just wondered, is it because your dad told you were going to be a champion, or you really enjoyed being a part of this whole scenario and you knew in yourself that you were going to be a champion? It sounds like your dad might have been kind of directing the car or directing the life at that point. Yes, no?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was going to be a world champion in a sense because I had my dad, and he was so adamant about me, being successful in boxing. But at the same time, it's just something that I had inside of me. I don't know. I just knew that whatever I did, I was going to be successful in, and it just happened to be, boxing that he chose for me.
Yeah, well, you keep saying that he chose for you, but what I'm getting at is, did you want to be a part of that? Is that what you really wanted to do? He told you you're going to be a world champ, so you said, okay, I'm going to be a world champ, but did you really want to go in that direction?
No, I would have preferred not to do boxing, but like I said, it was what I was put in, and I had to do it, and I knew I believed in myself, I believed in my abilities and my capacity, and I just knew I was going to be successful in whatever I did. Like I said, it just happened to be boxing in this case.
Yes. And it seemed like even though your circumstances growing up were challenging and very difficult for you, you were able to kind of shift, and your mindset was different when you got in the boxing ring. I mean, you've won 28 of your 32 boxing matches, so you had to have that driven mindset. Tell us how you got to that place, being that you were struggling with so much emotionally. How were you able to turn it on and be focused when you would box somebody?
Well, I feel like it was just that anger that I had in me, from not really having a choice in anything I ever did, that propelled me to, and it gave me an edge because I didn't care about my well-being.
Yeah.
So, I used this analogy before where, I said, when I got in the ring and, I would get punched or whatever, it was like trying to put out fire with gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
Like the more you hit me, the more fuel you gave me, the more that I wanted to hurt you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so for you, you just use that the anger inside was helpful for you. The anger you felt, the struggle, the fact that you couldn't choose what you wanted to do. This is what you're going to do. So you had a lot of anger built up, and that's how you use it for, I guess, good in your situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say good,
Yeah,
right? But
right.
it ended up being good because my in my sport
Yeah.
that was the name of the game. It was, who could hurt the other person the most, and I didn't care about being hurt, like I said. So for me, it was all just perfectly aligned.
Yeah.
What's your relationship with your dad now? Is he still living?
Yes, he still lives. It's non-existent.
Yeah.
So when's the last time you saw him?
I wouldn't know.
So years, right?
Well, no. Um, yeah. To be honest, I wouldn't know when the last time I saw him was. But it hasn't been years because he's still involved with my family and my brother and whatnot. So he's around.
Mm-hmm. Growing up, you've mentioned your father so far. What about your mother and your relationship with her growing up when all this was going on with you and your dad?
Well, I excuse my mom for a lot of it because she was also a victim. When it came down to it, we would both kind of go through the same thing, and she didn't really have a choice in a lot of it. And well, yeah, I mean, we just, like I said, I did the best that I could with what I got, and like that was my way of helping my mom out and helping my family out. Being successful in whatever I did, so we could get us out of, first off, the poverty that we were living, and I felt like that would allow us to live a better life.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I'm the oldest of four.
And were there other boys?
Yes, it's me, then my sister, then two brothers.
And was your dad as tough on them as he was on you?
Well, no, not to the same extent. I mean, he was strict and stern, and it was his way or the highway. But by the time that my siblings got a little bit older and got to the point where they could do sports or whatever, I feel like my dad was already tired of having been so much with me that they got a really watered down version of my dad.
Yeah. You've been talking about just how focused he was on you and how invested he was in you. You were very successful winning many matches. Was there a time that you got in the ring and you were like, you couldn't use that anger, you were just feeling defeated, and that mindset shifted for you? And then how did you get through that?
Well, yeah, my last three fights, those were the fights that I lost. That's when I felt like there was the biggest disconnect between my body and my brain.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, I started trying to be a better person to myself, trying to find that self-love and care for myself. And that's when everything started to crumble because I realized that my foundation when it came to boxing, when it came to my career, had been built, on nothing, and on anger, on anger and self-hate, and so it wasn't, like I said, when I started to have that mind, that shift in my brain where I started to care for myself. I started to look out for myself. I feel like that's when like I said, the anger, the hatred, the whatever fueled me before, it just wasn't there anymore.
Mm. It seems like you had a moment of self-compassion and, like you mentioned, self-love and doing some introspection. And that's where the shift happened in your life for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you decided to retire last year. Kind of walk us through because that was probably took a lot of courage to do that, to say, I need to retire, or maybe it didn't. Tell us what helped you be able to speak about that and follow through with it.
Well, I mean, it did and it didn't. It was something that I had been looking forward to my whole life, to be able to say bye to this sport. But it was bittersweet because there was so much left undone. at least for me in this sport. I obviously I wish I would have succeeded more. I wish I would have been a multiple time world champion in different weight classes and whatnot. But that this is where that self-love, self-compassion, for forgiving myself for a lot of what I put myself through, and just appreciating myself for what I did get to do, because I got to do what only a handful of fighters get to do. I got to be a world champion. I got to hoist that belt, and not just that, but I got to give my family a beautiful life. you know so for me, that was more than enough. That was what my goal in going into the sport, and suffering with through what I suffered. That was the whole point.
What did you learn from all of that? You talk about the suffering. You talk about, if we go back to the early days, what you had to endure and what you went through with your dad to this day, as you said. I just wondered what it is you learned. Do you have children of your own? Are you married?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. No,
So
I'm not married.
Okay.
I have children though.
okay. So what is the message that you'll share with them? You learned what it was like having a dad that was not as supportive as he should be. So what did you learn from the experiences that you endured and that you had to go through? That how you share things with your children? What are you teaching them? What is the role model that you are now to your children? What are the most important things that you make sure you share with them?
Well, I feel like the most important would be to love yourself, for them to love themselves, and I feel like that's where really that should be the foundation to everything. Because had I loved myself, I wouldn't have put myself through what I put myself through. Had I loved myself, I wouldn't have endured the suffering that I endured. Had I loved myself, I gonna sound it's gonna sound heavy, but had I loved myself, I would have killed myself when I initially intended to when I was 17. I feel like that would have been the best form of self love for me.
Oh, tell us about that part of your life when you were about 17. And because I think there are people listening, teenagers, athletes, that really struggle during that time, and especially athletes in the pressure. Kind of walk us through what happened there and what prevented you, and move forward from that time.
Well, what really helped me was having my family, my siblings, my mom. I mean, I know now they're finding out just how bad it truly was for me. But to me, that I used them to anchor myself here to this earth, because like, I knew that I was in a position to. I knew I could help make their lives better. Um, and it was something that I guess it was the weight that I chose to carry, to put myself through all of this so that they could in turn live a better life. Um, but yeah, it was to be honest, I don't really remember much from that time. I feel like my brain chose to forget a lot of it. But well, yeah, I remember that was my siblings and my mom were what I kept in mind, through those times, and I just knew I had to do it for them.
Okay. So your motivation to fight was to take care of them, and then having the support during that time was really helpful to move you through it. Having a support system, having people you care about, that helped you kind of persevere through the tough times for you.
Yeah, and boxing at the same time, this is why I have a love-hate relationship with boxing, because it was so cruel to me. It was such a brutal sport to me. And, but at the same time, it gave me that outlet. It allowed me to let go of some of that anger. I mean, it was perfect. I would go through stuff at home with my dad or whatever, and, I'd look forward to getting in the ring and being able to let it out on somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if I was to ask you, as a dad, as a former boxer now, as you're retiring here, all the things that you've learned in life, all the things that you had to go through that you've shared with us already here, I just wondered, what three things are the most important things that we need to share with our young people, and as a dad, as a role model, as somebody that people look up to, so that we can help that next generation? What are the three most important things that you would share with your children to make sure they don't ever have to endure what you've gone through?
Well, one, the like I said, the main one I feel is to love oneself.
Right. Yep. You
Love
mentioned that a
yourself
minute ago. Yep. That was great.
regardless. Love yourself no matter what. And when you do that, when you get to that level where you love yourself regardless, like I feel like you're gonna do whatever's best for you. You're gonna be able to push society and family and whatever, push it aside and really focus on yourself and ask yourself like what you want to do with life. Because I've already had the money, I've had the fame, I've had the whatever, and none of that was was enough.
Mm-hmm.
None of that was enough to fill the void that that self love fills.
Mm-hmm.
If you love yourself, I feel like that's that fills the void. And well, yeah, that's the main thing, to love yourself, and go from there. Use that as the foundation to anything and everything that you're going to do with your life.
And I know you have a couple more you want to share. I'm curious, how have you begun to love yourself more? What specific things do you do every day that help you value who you are and feel good about who you are?
Well, compassion, I guess. I try to be more compassionate with myself and try to be more patient with myself, because I did dig quite a hole going through this life, not caring to live, for since I was 17.
Yeah.
So this whole journey of self-love and finding worth in myself, just begun for me. And thankfully, I've always tried to be a good person. I've always tried to help. I've always done my best to lend a helping hand for anyone, that's struggling or going through anything. Or I've donated so much money. I've always done my best to help. So I use that in a sense to like kind of help me and be more forgiving with myself, because I know that I've always just tried to be a good person. I have a pretty clean conscience, so that's a good way a good place to start for me, being that that I've always tried my best to be a good person and to help. And so it allows me to better be able to forgive myself and be more understanding with what I went through.
Mm-hmm. So for you, it's more self-compassion, it's forgiving yourself, and giving of yourself. And those are just a few of the things that have really helped you practice feeling that self-love that you think is so important in the foundation for not just you, but for everybody. And Scott had it said there's three things. What are the other two things that you would like people to know or to practice every day to feel good about their mental wellness?
You talked about love over and above that. That's most important, certainly.
Yes.
Yeah.
What other
I
things?
feel like having work ethic. I feel like being disciplined. That 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 has a lot to do with being successful, and even again practicing that self-love on a daily basis and never forgetting about that. I feel like that's another thing that people should really carry with themselves, to be more compassionate, more forgiving, more understanding, and like again, love themselves more. So it's having that discipline, having that self-love, and finding something that you're really passionate about. I feel like that helps a lot too, when you're doing something that you love. And money is not any measure of success. I've had a lot of money, more money than I knew what the heck to do with, and again, nothing filled that void. So I feel like people should strive to do something that fulfills them, regardless whether they're making a lot of money or not. Like being fulfilled, I feel like is more important than any of that.
And I think for you right now, I know one of the things that you are passionate about, if not your number one passion, is helping people with their mental health and really sharing your story. If you were in front of a bunch of athletes right now or non athletes and they were struggling with depression or just feeling stuck, what would you share with them that would be really important for them to hear in this moment?
I mean, see, like for me, my journey was so different because I mean, yeah, I love fighting. Like I said, getting in the ring was the best for me. That's what I enjoyed the most out of anything. You know, getting in the ring, and I spent so much time in the ring that like it was my second home. So finding something that they love, and that they're not doing it for money or for whatever, is just something that really makes them feel alive when they're doing it.
Hmm.
For me, that would be the best advice that I could give anyone. Find something that you're really passionate about. Find something that wakes you up whenever you're doing it, that fills you with joy, that regardless whether you do it good or not, like find something that you love, and do that to the best of your ability. I feel like that would be the main goal that I would try to get across to any athlete, because I know what it's like, being pushed to do something from a very young age that you're so good at it, but it's not really what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So my main advice would be for them to find what really makes them feel alive.
You've shared a lot of wonderful information with us today. Let me ask you this. If somebody was to say, "Oh, Figueroa, yeah, that's the boxer guy. Who is it? Yeah, did you ever see him? Oh, yeah, I remember him. Yeah, oh," and people start talking about you, not maybe knowing of what you had to go through with your dad and your life and what have you, how would you like your legacy to be defined? If somebody were to say your name and point to you, "Oh, yeah, I remember, they talk world champs and this and that," and what would you like to be best remembered for? What are you proudest of? What would you like them to cherish most about, "I remember him"? Maybe they don't know about some of the issues that you had to go through with mental wellness and things, and the mental things, What about your legacy? What would make you proudest to be able to share with us all?
That I'm a good person, that I'm a good human. I feel like we're all a drop in the bucket that is the ocean, a drop of water in the ocean. And it, I'm no to me, like, my measure of being good and being successful is, how many people you helped, and or tried to help at least. And I feel like that's always been my thing, to try and help and to try to make life better for whoever I come in contact with. I feel like that's what I would want to be remembered for being a good person, a good human.
Hmm. And I love that. I think, some of the things you've said today are just that resonating of like the self-love, practicing compassion, being forgiving, being a good person, giving of yourself. It seems like you're definitely on a different journey and something that's very fulfilling for you. What about, how do you practice your mental wellness every day, that you're making sure I'm taking care of myself mentally, so people out there get an idea of what you do to do that, because you've done some work already and you're in a different place. Share with everybody the work you're doing and maybe some tips you can give people to work on their mental health as well.
Well, I mean, talk to somebody. That's the best advice I could give, is for people to start looking into their mental health, and why, when I got diagnosed, I started looking at life and people also through this lens of, mental health. And obviously not trying to diagnose, not trying to excuse people, and not trying to, because I don't really know about any of that. But it's allowed me to be even more compassionate and more understanding, because, well, yeah, like, the way that I was acting, the things that I was doing, the situation I was putting myself in, I realized were a result of what I lived and how I lived and what I was put through. And it was a combination of life. And so I feel like now, having been diagnosed myself and then going back and, redigesting my life all over again with this knowledge that I got, And I feel like it's allowed me to just to be a better human, because like I realize that we are all hurting, we are all suffering in some way, and yeah, a lot of us we find coping mechanisms that are healthy, but the majority of us, I feel like, are just doing whatever it takes to be able to get through to the next day, not looking at how we're treating ourselves and what we're putting ourselves through, and or those around us, and I feel like that's what's really important.
Mm-hmm.
As you look ahead now, you say you're retiring from boxing, you're in your mid-30s. What lies ahead? Your whole life, basically, or a good portion of it, is all still there. What's going to be taking place? What are the things that you hope to do, and what are some of the things that are on your list that you say, I want to make sure I do this, 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 and this? What comes to mind?
You see, it's so hard for me to speak about stuff like that, because I didn't plan to live this long.
Mm.
I feel like I've been improvising since I was 17, and so yeah, like I don't know. I feel like I build my life day by day as I go, which in a sense I feel like it's a good thing. It allows me to live in the now.
Yeah.
I'm focused on surviving and just being happy with what I've done and what I put myself through, and more so with just myself as a person, you know. So yeah, questions like that are hard for me to answer, because it's hard for me to look into the future, because it's hard for me.
It sounds like for right now, you just kind of are slowing down and focusing on this moment. And I think it's really great that you are living in the present moment. And how do you take care of yourself right now? And that's kind of where you're at, is just how do I take care of myself? How do I build myself up? And then maybe your question, maybe that's something you'll start thinking about as you feel more settled into who you are. Because it seems like you're trying to figure out, who am I without boxing? Maybe that's the place you're at. Who am I without boxing?
Yeah.
And so this is an exciting time. You're getting curious about who you are, doing a lot of introspection.
Yes. Yeah, that's all I do. Like I say I'm surviving whenever anyone asks how I'm doing. It's like I'm surviving, and that it takes a lot. It takes a lot to survive, especially when you don't really care to. So I'm working on that, finding a reason, finding something to look forward to, and again, I have my kids, so watching them grow up and be happy, be fulfilled, that is one thing that I'm really looking forward to, and I hope I get to have that in my children, where they just love themselves for who they are, and I want to make them feel loved and fulfilled, and like they're. Well, yeah, because their reason for existing is my reason for existing. And I want them to love themselves more than, more than I ever could.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I don't know how Dr. Nina feels about this, but I can't tell you, as a former broadcaster and sports anchor, for decades, I've interviewed people that iconic individuals, Hall of Famers, Super Bowl champions, Olympic champions. And I have to tell you, with all sincerity, I have been most impressed with everything you've shared with us today. And when we've asked, either one of us have asked you about anything that potentially would deal with mental wellness and issues that you might have had from the time that your dad was, I guess you'd call it abusive in a way. I've never met the man, don't know the whole scenario, but to go through what you did as a young child, and then you did get into boxing, but to have the concerns that you did when you were 17, and you say that's still a part of your life, I hope you don't give up, because I would like, if I knew you and you lived where I did, you're the type of person that I would want to have a friendship with, because you seem to have focused on the right things that we need to be concerned about. So I hope you don't give up. This is just a friend that just met you saying to you, don't give up. You have a lot of wonderful things up there in that mind of yours to share. Yeah. So continue to be positive and productive in a passionate, purposeful way. And I think that you can really do some wonderful things and make a difference in the lives of those that really need it most. Certainly your kiddos, that's most important, but other people in our community, especially since you've been there, you've done that, you've endured it, you've had to go through it. And so now you have the knowledge and the wisdom to share with others. It's all right. Don't give up. Be as positive as you can. So let me take my hat off to you and salute you, because I really have enjoyed this. And I know the good doctor who's doing this every day, I'm sure she feels along the same way.
Oh, I just think everything you said, well said.
Yeah.
I did what he said, and I admire your courage to step out of the ring and to speak up and move forward about mental health, which you don't have to do. You're choosing to do it, to give back, to help others, to encourage others. So you're a role model right now, and I'm sure your kids are seeing this authentic, transparent dad, and I'm sure you're showing them self-love without having to teach it, and that's beautiful. So thank you for being on the show today. It's been wonderful.
Double thank you. Just keep it up and stay positive. You're just wonderful. You're a great role model.
Yep.
So don't ever question that.
Yeah.
Don't ever question that.
Being human, is we're all human, and I feel like, me having the courage to do this, because it does take a lot of courage, because I know exactly how people can be. I was a boxer, and people will look at my fights and be like, "Oh, this guy's crazy," because I didn't care. Yeah, I didn't care for my well-being in the ring, and it was very apparent. I'd get in there and I'd just be like, "Come on, what are you gonna do? Hit me?" I wanted to be hit. I wanted to feel something. Like I said, that's why I made that analogy. They were trying to put out a fire with gasoline, because, they thought they were going to hit me enough to deter me for what I was doing. But that was my whole goal, is to be hit, to feel something. So like using my platform, especially that I have, having been a boxer, and not just that, but a world champion boxer, the first one from here, from the Valley, I'm no punk. And people know that. If people watch my fights, my last 3 fights, it all went downhill. I have no excuse. I just didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't care about being successful, about winning. So, I feel like I'm in a great place to be speaking about this, because of what I did. Having been a professional boxer my whole life, all I knew was violence and anger, and and I wasn't human. I never felt human. I was a robot.
Yeah.
So now that I'm going through this process, through this transition of having been a boxer, a robot, and a successful one that didn't care. You could look at my fights, and it's apparent that I didn't care about my well-being. And now that I'm doing this, taking a step back and choosing to love myself and appreciate myself and forgive myself, I feel like, I'm in the perfect place to be speaking about this, because I've been there. Well, what are people going to say? Like, "Oh, he's weak," or no, like I'm human, and I'm allowing myself to be human, and I'm trying to show people that it's okay to be human.
Love it.
That's my main objective now, I guess.
Well, you're doing a great job.
Yep.
So thank you.
Can't thank you enough. We appreciate it. Don't give up on yourself. Stay positive. And thanks again. Very much appreciated. All the great. So that was wonderful. Ready to wrap things up? Are you ready to take it home, as they say?
Yes. Well,
yet another edition of Conversations of Connection. I'm Scott Murray.
Send
us home.
I'm Dr. Nina Restoria. Thank you for joining us.